Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And you're not.
This week we're talking about the early years of SNL. Season 4, Episode 6 with host Carrie Fisher and musical guest The Blues Brothers. This show originally aired on November 18th, 1978. Brad, the Blues Brothers are back.
They're back.
And so we may as well bring in our Blues Brothers expert.
I can't think of a better time to bring back author Daniel Divasay. We had him on in our off season where we talked about his amazing book, The Blues Brothers, An Epic Friendship, The Rise of Improv and the Making of American Film Classic. A wonderful biography on Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. If you guys haven't checked that episode out, give it a listen. Please check out the book. Daniel, welcome. We're excited to have you on with us and talk about this episode.
It's my pleasure. You guys really impressed me the last time I talked to you. I made a change to my book because of your guys' knowledge. So my hat's off to you.
Sorry about that.
No. It was the only fix I had to make for the paperback. And that's just journalism, man. You got to go with it.
That's awesome.
We touched upon it a little bit, Daniel. You were watching the show at this time, right? Fall of 78. You were a fan of Saturday Night Live. You were watching it back then?
Yeah. I don't know when I got into watching this stuff, but I would have been 10 years old, 11 years old. And so I stayed up if I could, and I definitely remember seeing some of these late 70s episodes when they aired. I don't remember if this is before or after the Rolling Stones episode.
This was a few weeks after. Yeah.
Okay. So that one I stayed up and watched. I remember that. I mean, I remember that Mick Jagger, I thought he lost his voice and I was wondering what was going
Yes.
on. But so I may have watched this one when it aired. If so, I was sleepy. But yeah, I was just barely old enough and had enough of a sense of comedy that I was staying up and watching some of this stuff. This is the same era when I would stay up on Sunday nights to watch Monty Python on the local PBS station,
right,
which aired Monty Python at like 10:30, some ungodly hour on Sunday night. So Saturday night was Saturday Night Live. Sunday night was Monty Python. I think SCTV Network 90 was also airing somewhere in there on those weekend late night hours. It's all kind of a blur, but it was great stuff.
Taking in all the comedy you can every week, right, Daniel?
As much as I possibly could. This was all wonderful stuff. I loved every minute of it.
Well, you don't remember this episode. Maybe you watched it, maybe you didn't. Having watched it now, do you think that 10 or 11-year-old Daniel would have enjoyed this episode?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, Princess Leia walking out on stage, is a pretty big deal. And I've probably seen this episode a few times in my life. So it's one of those where I'm not even sure whether I saw it when it aired or whether I saw it on reruns. But this was a point in history when those of us who were paying any attention, we knew now who the Blues Brothers were, and they played with Steve Martin. And so the Blues Brothers were a thing. And so when they came and played musical guest on this show for a second time, the people watching in the studio audience and on television, finally, we kind of got now what this was. Whereas the first time when the Blues Brothers were on SNL, a lot of people were kind of confused. Like, was it serious or was it a gag? But yeah, and I wrote in my book that this episode is like a big Blues Brothers infomercial on some level. It's like, here's the Blues Brothers, starring SNL.
And can you speak at all to, for the 6 listeners we have who might be under 40, who can't comprehend what Star Wars was like at this time? Because I don't think we can skip over that fact. The host, Carrie Fisher, right. Star Wars it had been a year out, but it was still a huge thing in pop culture, right? Still?
Yeah. In that era, there were 3 television networks and most of the stuff on TV was pretty lame. And so what you had in popular culture was big bands like Queen and Kiss and Cheap Trick and Pink Floyd and AC/DC and big movies. And so Star Wars was one of the first, not the first. I think Jaws was considered the first blockbuster, the first summer blockbuster. Yeah. But you had these huge movies, and there was none huger than Star Wars. I was talking to a neighbor of mine who's several years younger. He had like Star Wars sheets when he was a baby, but I actually stood in line, and watched Star Wars. It was a massive thing. You'd go see it at the theater and everybody at school would talk about it, and you'd go see it again and again and again. And there wasn't that much else to talk about. We didn't have this diffusion of popular culture, there wasn't a gazillion sort of endless things that you could just pull up on YouTube or go onto Discord and just see all this stuff. I mean, stuff was hard to get. And so, if you went and saw Star Wars, that was a big deal. And so Princess Leia being on SNL was like a meeting of worlds. Here's your Bill Murray and your Belushi and Aykroyd and these goofballs. And the Princess Leia, it was pretty awesome.
You mentioned only 3 networks and lame stuff on TV.
Largely.
Do either of you know, or Daniel, do you remember what aired on CBS the night before this came on?
I wouldn't have the foggiest idea.
Do you remember the Star Wars Holiday Christmas Special?
Oh, only as a infamous travesty.
When I was researching this, that apparently aired the night before this on CBS.
Oh my gosh, you are good with your research. That is fascinating.
The one and only time it has ever aired. It's
Wow.
never been released on video. They've never rerun it.
You can see it on YouTube, can't you?
You can see it on YouTube. I
Thank
saw it.
God.
I actually watched it a couple
Thank
years
God.
ago, but
Yeah.
yeah, that apparently aired the night before.
In November, they aired that? That's crazy.
Apparently.
Oh, I guess it was a holiday special.
Add that to the list of atrocities with that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the bar was very, very low for television back then.
What was good for Carrie Fisher, this was like her big role, right? She's someone who grew up, her parents were both very famous. She's Hollywood royalty, right?
Hollywood royalty, yeah.
But she's very young still, right?
22.
22.
Yeah.
very young, although aging quickly. I think she was drinking and smoking. And
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's amazing when you think about it that she's 22 and she, so she was like 20 or 21 when she did Star Wars. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And she's hitting at an interesting point, like you mentioned, Gary. Like the show is now hugely popular, right? And it's in the zeitgeist. It's in pop culture mainstream. But these guys all had to work to get there, like Belushi and Aykroyd and everybody. They had to work to get to that point. When you read about Carrie Fisher, and she had been hanging out with guys in the show, she had been friends with John at this point. They all really loved her because she was, they're actually younger than them, their age younger, but had come up this way. Like you said, Hollywood royalty. So she's somebody who was in this life since she was a kid. And so I think both those worlds just kind of surrounded each other at this time in New York. And she's a great fit for this show because she'd been part of this crowd for the last, year and a half since Star Wars.
I'm going to get some of this muddled, but I think she had been dating Paul Simon. And if that was the case, then she'd have been in that orbit of Lorne Michaels, who was very close with Paul Simon and all those guys.
I mean, to be fair, most female hosts in this era were dating Paul Simon.
Yeah.
So I believe this came right after Shelley Duvall, if I'm doing my math correctly.
You're right.
Although I'll draw one contrast, which is at the beginning of the series, which for you guys is 3-4 years ago that you were doing those. When somebody like Candice Bergen came on SNL, it was a huge deal for the performers, and they were agog and just like puppy dogs at her feet because they were these nobodies, and she was a movie star.
Yeah.
And then you go 3-4 years later when Belushi's made Animal House, and they've all become somewhat famous, and the show itself is on top. And so it's no longer this ridiculous chasm separating the huge movie star who's the host and the performers, who are now pretty big names unto themselves, right? It's interesting. So I'm guessing that the rapport among these performers backstage would have been different. It would have been more like they were almost equals, maybe. Whereas back in 1975, they were not equals. Someone like a Meathead or a Candy Bergen or a Richard Pryor was huge. And these performers were nobodies, and all that had changed by now, right? By season 4.
This is not the first time we've actually seen Carrie Fisher on SNL, though. Earlier this season, she was in a Schiller's Reel.
Oh, that's right.
Sushi by the Pool, right?
Good call.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sushi by the Pool, is it the same film as the one Belushi made when he had the ear infection and didn't show up, and had, I think, Landis and Spielberg make a film of him eating sushi by a pool? That's a different Sushi by the Pool film?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
This is a Schiller's Reel.
Forgive me.
This is
Schiller's
a
Reel.
Schiller's Reel that has Hal Holbrook running down the side of a mountain. It's amazing.
I don't remember that one, but again, I was half asleep when I watched these things in the first place.
Anything else we want to cover about Carrie Fisher?
Well, around this appearance would have been around the time when Belushi was setting her up with Aykroyd for an illicit affair. Although who exactly it was that he was cheating on with her is a little complicated. He was in a relationship, I believe, with Rosie Schuster at the time. I interviewed Rosie about that. And Rosie was, I think, maybe then still married to Lorne Michaels, so it gets complicated. Yeah. And Aykroyd had also been dating Lorraine Newman. Some of this kind of romantic tension on set is captured in that Saturday Night movie, which is about, the debut of the show in 75. Aykroyd was the single guy in that gang. And I'm guessing that it was maybe around the time they filmed this episode. And you can see some chemistry between Aykroyd and Carrie Fisher. I think they kiss each other at one point. In fact, in the closing, she tries to kiss him, and he's a gentleman. He's kind of backing away. I think he pretends to not see her. And then a little later, she grabs him and kisses him, like draws him to her by the tie and kisses him. And I think that was around the time their illicit relationship started, which Belushi rejoiced in. He loved the idea of the two of them dating because Belushi loved Carrie Fisher but wasn't going to date her.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He just was very into the idea of the two of them dating.
That's adorable. Well, there's a lot to talk about here, not just with Carrie Fisher, but also with the Blues Brothers. So should we just get into it?
Let's do it.
Sure thing.
The cold open starts with Garrett Morris, of course.
Garrett Morris.
And Garrett does this intro about being at the Black Rhino Club, and he kind of does a little bit of Dan's intro from the Universal Amphitheater, kind of, but then does his own little spin on it, and then clumsily introduces the Blues Brothers.
In true Garrett fashion, stumbles over the English language just a touch.
Yeah.
And then introduces them.
Black Rhino, of course, was the name of the production company that Belushi and Aykroyd had in New York. That was the company that held whatever things they were doing together. They had an office that was disguised as a travel office.
That's the name of that.
Okay.
So Looky Loos wouldn't come in. Yeah, it was Black Rhino Productions.
Okay.
That's where that came from.
And then John and Dan come out. They do their entrance, and then they go right into Soul Man. Classic performance. I'm just going to sit back now, Brad. And
I mean, it's iconic.
Yeah.
I mean, that moment of the band kind of going down, John and Dan standing still, the band kicks into Soul Man and they go nuts.
Yeah.
That is on every single Saturday Night Live highlight clip for the last 50, 48 years. I mean, it's one of the most iconic moments of the show.
Yeah.
I wrote in my book that, let's see. Yeah, Garrett introduced Jake and Elwood direct from a statewide automobile tour of Illinois and Indiana, which again, Aykroyd wrote that. John and Dan strode coolly on stage, looking measurably more confident than in their SNL debut a few months earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had it by this point. They'd performed. They
had the act,
in the Universal Amphitheater. John produced a key on a chain and ceremonially unlocked Dan's handcuffed hand from his black leather valise. Dan opened the case and produced his harmonica. As John snapped his fingers and chewed gum, the band halted. John turned a nimble cartwheel. The musicians launched into Soul Man, and the brothers exploded in dance.
Yes, they did.
Oh, and I mentioned here that in mid-song, the band added 4 extra bars so that Dan could take a harp solo.
Yeah.
And it was pretty good. It was a pretty good harmonica solo. Yeah. He could actually play the harmonica. I think he got coached at one point.
Yeah, this performance, like you said, Brad, is iconic. And for me, it's always been Dan. Like, Dan just steals this for me because he's so good.
I hate to call Dan a dancer, but John's just up there like flailing about and shimmying around.
Right.
Dan's got these like choreographed moves that he keeps going from one to the other to the other. Like it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sophie and I were watching it, my wife and I, and we're just thinking, man, the things you could do with your body when you're in your like early 20s, just again, like you said, just flailing around and bopping around, and
so much fun. Great song. The album hadn't come out yet. I think it comes out in about a week and a half. So
is that right?
Like,
okay.
Like you mentioned, Daniel, this is basically a promo. It's such a promo for the upcoming album that we've talked about. Will go on to become a #1 album in a few months. This is going to be their their hit single, Soul Man. It's so good. The band is so good. It's so great to see the band on there this time. The full Blues Brothers band, Cropper and Dunn, and
which you hadn't seen in the
Murphy.
first the first Blues Brothers performance on SNL. It wasn't the actual Blues Brothers band. It was the show band, right? The SNL band. So this was the actual Blues Brothers, which was partly the SNL band and partly these amazing hired guns, Cropper and Dunn et al.
Yeah, and you can tell the difference not only just in the sound, right? With Cropper and Dunn and Matt Murphy, you have Tom Scott's here at this point. Like,
Tom Scott.
Yeah, the band is solid.
Oh, it sounds amazing. Light years ahead of the first performance.
Yeah.
And you could tell they'd been rehearsing.
Right. Yep.
You could tell that they'd kind of worked out their shtick. Yep. And even their outfits, the Blues Brothers outfits, are like, it's as if John Landis's wife, the costume expert Deborah Nudelman, had worked with them. She hadn't, but everything's perfect. Like Aykroyd would have seen to that. The hats are exactly right. The ties are right. The jackets are the same color.
Right.
It all fits. They put some real work into it. I also wanted to mention in my book, I noted there was a lengthy Daily News article, New York Daily News. This is when the New York Daily News circulated to like 1 million homes around New York. They had embedded with the show that week. And if you go back and read the article, it shows the state that SNL was in at this point. And by that, I mean, they were pretty coked out. The performers were pretty jaded. There was a lot of tension on set. The press kind of pressed in, and they were under a constant microscope. It was not the innocent fun of 3 years earlier. I'm sure you've noticed this as you've watched episodes in seasons 3 and 4, that it's a more jaded group. So backstage before air, the reporter from the Daily News captured a run-in between Belushi and a photographer where he says, "Get that fucking thing out of my face before I break it over your head." And the reporter is sitting there watching this, probably mouth open. And Dan Aykroyd seizes him in a bear hug and pulls him back. And then a little later, the same reporter watched Belushi sneak up behind a young woman on the set and bite her ass, basically. And then she shrieks and he apologizes. And then after that, there's this cascade of quotes from people apologizing for Belushi. John Landis says he's basically a sweet person, Belushi, who's very sorry for much of what he does. And Lorne Michaels says John is his own worst salesman. And Aykroyd says John scares the hell out of me all the time, but even at his worst, he's lovable.
Huh.
Do you know, Daniel, were Dan and John still doing 1941 at this point, or had they finished? Because I know we had talked about earlier in the season, they were doing a lot of flying back and forth, and they weren't coming back till like Thursday, Fridays. Were they still doing that at this point? Do you know?
1941 at least was happening around this time. I couldn't swear to it. It's been so long since I did this research, but the bigger point with regard to Aykroyd and Belushi, who are the guys I'm interested in, is that by this time, Belushi was much more into the Blues Brothers than he was into Saturday Night Live.
Right.
And he just wanted to go do the Blues Brothers at this point. Mm-hmm. Aykroyd, as you can see from this episode, he's in every sketch.
Right.
He wrote a lot of them. He is the Obi-Wan Kenobi voice. I think that's his voice. It sounds like him. He's all over it. He probably wrote half of it. So Aykroyd at this point is firing on all cylinders, is multitasking, right? Belushi, I think, just wants to do the Blues Brothers. He probably just wants to, go off and be Jake and Elwood Blues. But they were very busy, and you could see why Aykroyd must have been overwhelmed. He was so busy at this point in his career. I mean, doing so much. Anything on top of SNL would have been very difficult for him to pull off, because it was, he was a writer as well as performer, and just anchored that show. He was the guy who they called on to do all these impressions. It was a huge job. They didn't have 15 people on the cast back then,
No. And that's been a consistent, you saw a little bit less of that in season 3 with Dan when he takes over Weekend Update, and that doesn't seem to really be his thing. And you see him kind of take a little bit of a step back from the writing and the being in everything. But in coming back to season 4, he's definitely a main presence in the show again, like he had been in season 2.
Yeah. I was gonna come on here and tell you guys, wow, look, Aykroyd was in every set. I mean, most of them are in every sketch. I mean, it's a small cast. You see less of Garrett, maybe a little less, maybe of Lorraine. Right.
It's an interesting night that way, though. You're right. Yeah. It's a lot. There's a lot of big sketches. Like John's in a lot, but there's a lot of full cast sketches or a lot of Garrett sketches. It's a big night for the cast.
Yeah, the cast has a lot going on, and it all starts with Carrie's monologue. So she comes out dressed as Princess Leia, and she starts telling a joke that she heard from Obi-Wan. And that's where we hear Dan come on as voiceover as Obi-Wan, and he's really into the joke and the audience is not. And he does this crazy laugh, which just kind of resonates because they have an echo on his voice. Did you guys catch there's this weird moment where someone hit the wrong button in the switch and you see, I think it's Tom Davis on a green screen?
I think it's Tom Davis on a green screen, yeah.
I thought it was a woman, but it's a massive technical glitch, and it destroys the monologue because so for a few seconds you just see some weird like person on a green screen, and then without explanation switches back to the monologue, and then she finishes it and everybody's just kind of speechless because nobody really knows what the hell is happening at that point, and then it just ends. And so the monologue was great up to that point, but then it just sort of bizarrely just sort of implodes.
I would argue that the audience was out on the monologue before that, and that just kind of threw at everything off even more. So
maybe they were off already because the joke was bizarre, and
it was a bizarre joke. She even makes reference of it being she's afraid the joke is too inside.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is she's spouting off all this like George Lucas Star Wars gibberly gook, whatever. But I agree, Guy. I don't know if the audience was totally in on it. You get that weird cutaway and you're like, what happens? And then you realize they're basically doing like a soft transition to the next
live
sketch. and then it explains
shit happens.
You see what that was. You see what that was supposed to be or why they were doing it, whatever, practicing it.
Right.
It's like they were like testing out the camera feed and somebody, like you said, hit the wrong button.
I don't think it was in that moment though. I think it was like a pre-record and someone switched something and it jumped and then it goes back. And then Carrie sets up the first sketch. Instead of throwing to commercial, she sets it up as, what if she was in a sci-fi movie in the 50s? And then we cut to Beach Blanket Bingo. Well, it's a take on Beach Blanket Bingo. Yes. Yeah, the first person we see is Bell running across with the surfboard yelling, "Surf's up!" Which may be my favorite part of this sketch.
He does it 2 or 3 times.
He does it 3 times. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anytime I can write Bell's name down 3 times in a sketch, I love.
I wonder if younger people would be incredulous at that because, and I'm pretty old, I never saw any of those Annette and Frankie movies. I haven't seen any of them ever. I get the reference, right? But it's just funny. It's so old. I guess it made sense at the time because you had the 50s revival going on, Happy Days and such.
Grease.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this whole thing is a take on those old 50s beach movies with Frankie and Annette.
Crossed with a sci-fi, with an alien showing up.
Crossed with an alien or Carrie Fisher as, Princess Leia showing up. And this is a sketch where everyone is in it.
Everybody's in it.
Everybody, including the writers.
Yeah,
right?
Franken and Davis have prominent roles in this sketch. And everyone's there and they're just partying and they're talking about it being the 50s and they don't do drugs or drink. So any mention.
So they're all really on edge.
Yeah, they're really horny.
Yeah, right. So anything you say is going to make me laugh. And my favorite line from that is where Gilda says, I'm Annette, and these are my breasts.
I'm Annette. This is my boyfriend, Frankie, and these are my breasts.
They're all wearing these false boobs. It's a good send-up of the 50s, definitely.
Yeah. But they beam her in. You then realize what that green screen cutaway was. Right. Because they do cool. I like that kind of special effect where like beam her into the sketch. That was cool.
Yeah. And then the sketch goes on for quite a while.
And then it goes on.
And it keeps going on and keeps going. Anyway, yeah. And so Garrett eventually comes on as Chubby Checker. John comes in as a biker and Dan comes on as Vincent Price. Everyone gets in here.
There's a musical number. Are you gonna like the New Kid on Earth musical number sung very well? I must say by Carrie Fisher. I thought she did a great job leading this musical number.
I'm a teenager from outer space, trying to make it in the human race. Although I come from another world, I'm really a very nice girl. And even though I drop from the sky, I would never steal another girl's guy. I don't want all the girls to hate me. I just want the guys to take me. I want to wear a two-piece bathing suit. I want to find a boy that's really cute. Write love letters in the sand and surf, but it's hard when you're the new kid on earth.
But it's fun. It's very, like Daniel said, it's very big. It's very fun. Huge cast, great set.
I was going to say the set.
It's kind of, it's very interesting. And I understand why they did it for your first sketch of the night, because it is so big. Like this feels like you want it to be in the middle, like a tent pole kind of sketch, but the production value and everything going on, it had to be the first thing up. So it's really ballsy throwing this out to lead the night off. And I think they did a good job with it. It was really fun.
Yeah.
It was a nice transition too from the monologue with, like you said, the effect of bringing Princess Leia into this sketch too.
And I like how they don't go back to Star Wars. Like,
I was just going to say
Star Wars moment, because they haven't done this a lot in this era. Remember, we've seen hosts, and I think they've only done it maybe once before, where the host is like poking fun at them or what they're known for.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, get it out of the way, do the monologue, your first sketch, and then Star Wars is gone. And I do like that like nowadays. I feel like you'd harp on that forever.
Yeah, the rest of the episode, we get to see Carrie Fisher's acting chops, and she really holds her own.
Yeah. Well, she's in the next sketch as one of the daughters of the Loud family. So we get Bill and Jane as the parents and Gilda and Carrie as their daughters, and they are loud. So they're the Loud family, and they just yell the entire time.
It's fun enough. I like when the couple goes upstairs and they're loudly making love.
Yeah.
Because they're loud. So they do everything loud.
Gary?
Yeah.
You didn't like it?
It was fine. It was a one joke thing. I thought,
one joke.
You know, when Dan comes in as the boy for Carrie, I guess, or Gilda. Sorry, Dan comes in to pick up Gilda, and he's very quiet, and he's kind of thrown off by the thing. That was fun. And then John comes in as an air traffic, I guess not air traffic controller, but he's like the guy on the ground, you know, directing the planes and stuff. So he doesn't hear anything.
Exit flagger or something.
Yeah. I thought that was fine, but yeah, it was fine. It was just one joke, though. It felt like
it was just one joke.
I don't know.
SNL is famous for that. Let's play this one joke out over 4 or 5 minutes. And sometimes it works.
I think it works in this one. I don't know. I thought they did a really good job with it. I agree. At first, I was like, okay, this is going to be just a one note thing. They're just going to be loud and shouting at each other, and they are. And I think some of the subtleties or the what I've ended up liking about it get lost in that, because it is so easy to start off with, and the performances are just so loud because they're just yelling. But the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Like, they bring Dan comes in and he's soft spoken and deals with it kind of in one way, and then as you mentioned, John comes in. He's got the earphones on, so he can't hear him. And then Garrett comes in as a cop. Like people, it's another big sketch. Everybody but Lorraine is in it. So it's like another like full sketch. And I feel like everybody came in with a purpose and it was fun. And I agree. When it started off, I was not ready to enjoy it. I was like, okay, this is going to be one note. But by the end and after the end, I kept thinking about it. I was like, this is actually a better sketch than I gave it credit for. And I actually really liked it.
Really liked it. All right.
I did. I really liked it. This was one I agree. When I first started watching, I didn't like it. And when the episode finished and I started going back and thinking about the sketches, this one kept rising up as like, I like that. I like that. I liked it more than I thought I did in the moment.
I thought the out was weird too. Like Garrett shows up as a cop who is just driving by and tells them they have to be quiet. And that was it. Like, I was very abrupt.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a punchline is, I could hear you when I was driving by in my
Right.
car.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, looking at it now down the road, I like that they never went back to this. Like, I like that the Loud family wasn't a recurring
Oh,
thing.
yeah, it was a one-off, right?
I like this as a one-off. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Did you like the next one any better then?
It's funny because the next one I thought, no, I didn't like it any better. I wanted it to be more like ex-cops, to be honest with you.
Ex-police. It feels like ex-police. It does feel like a bastard child of ex-police.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that then I kind of wanted them to be like ex-doctors. So that's, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this sketch is Dan and Bill playing orderlies who are mercy killers. And that's what they call themselves. It starts with, I guess, an unknown person. We don't know who's in that bed, but Gilda and John are there with the doctor played by Jane. And she's like, she can't talk. This person is basically a vegetable, as John says. They can only feel excruciating pain.
She's a veg.
Yeah. So
that was my favorite line from the sketch.
So we then cut to an office where Dan and Bill are going through files, and they see this and they're like, oh, we should put this person out of their misery.
Sounds like a job for us, all right.
Right. And that's where I was like, oh, are they going to be ex-doctors or something like that?
Right. They do set it up that way. Yes. Yeah. I agree.
And then what happens is that they end up trying to kill Garrett, who gets put in the same room as this other, the veg, as we say.
Garrett's 4 for 4 so far tonight.
It's big Garrett night.
He's in all 4 sketches so far. And Lorraine's in this one again. It's another full cast. It's one of the reasons why I actually like this episode a bit more.
Yeah.
Is I like
more of a team
so
effort
much of the cast.
I actually wrote that down. I was like, Brad likes this episode because everyone's involved in everything.
Yeah. I mean, Jane's in a ton of sketches.
Yeah.
It's
no,
great.
everyone is. Yeah. And then there's a theme song to this.
Sung by Bill. Everybody's singing tonight.
So this is another one that the context is sort of bad 70s television. And if you knew that context, I think the title even was like a play on maybe like the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood or something. I may be remembering this wrong. I think but the whole thing, it's a play on just crappy 1970s television. Like some idiot would have actually thought up a TV show like this in the late 70s, you know? So not an all-time classic sketch, but it was fun.
It was a fun, bizarre one. I agree. Yeah. Fun, bizarre.
Well, that takes us into Weekend Update. This week, there's no sponsor for Weekend Update. We just roll right into the jokes.
Yeah. She gives like next on Weekend Update, and she gives her another Betty Ford face.
Betty Ford.
Right. I don't know. The beginning jokes here were fine. They were very much of the time. They were late 70s jokes. The worms in McDonald's food, Sambo, Bob's Jew Boy joke.
I got a big laugh out of that Bob's Jew Boy, and I was kind of aghast that these probably were all real news items. I guess there was a Sambo's restaurant chain. I can't believe it.
Yeah, there was a real.
Was there a restaurant chain called Sambo's?
There was. I did look that up. There was a real restaurant chain. Yeah.
The real headlines here were the things that kind of surprised me. You know, like wow, I could see why they were poking fun at them.
Yeah, I agree, Garrett. Not the best age jokes.
No. We get Father Guido Sarducci back to talk to us about the Vatican Bank.
Yeah, second time at the desk. I didn't like this one as much as this first one. Dare I say it wasn't silly enough? Like this was actually kind of a very satirical bit he does on the Catholic Church, right? And it's very smart. I don't want to like knock the writing in the piece, but I feel like when Father Guido Sarducci works his best is when it's just absurdly silly. And that's what makes him really shine. Yeah. And this is more just like biting satire, kind of like, you know, the Catholic Church selling clocks with the zodiac signs on them to raise money. And it's just like, it's smart. I didn't love it for the character as much as I normally do.
I have a soft spot for the guy because he really helped me in telling the story of Belushi's final days, because he was with Belushi
Sure.
in Belushi's final days. They were working on a screenplay together.
Yeah.
But, everything he thought up was funny. But yeah, some of it's funnier than other stuff. And this wasn't one of his greatest moments, but he's always a funny guy.
Yeah, he is. It's a funny character.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get another recurring character. Rosanna comes on for one of her classic bits about the Great American Smokeout.
Thanks a lot, Jen. Thanks a lot. Mr. Richard Fader from Fort Lee, New Jersey writes in and says, Dear Rosanna Dana, last Thursday I quit smoking. Now I'm depressed, I gained weight, my face broke out, I'm nauseous, I'm constipated, my feet swelled, my gums are bleeding, my sinuses are clogged, I got heartburn, I'm cranky, and I have gas. What should I do? Mr. Fader, you sound like a real attractive guy. You belong in New Jersey.
I think it's one of the better ones. We're about like halfway through our Rosanna Dana. This is like number 9 of 20-ish. So I mean, but she's peaking. It's really good. Again, this is another one. Anytime you see a Gilda clip or a SNL clip, I mean, you're going to see this.
Yeah.
You're going to see this clip. I'd say overall, even again, most of the Weekend Update bits, as they are anytime, are very timely. But even that considered, like, I think it's one of the better outings this season. 2 good guest correspondents. The jokes were...
I liked it.
They were funny. I mean,
it.
timely, they don't age well, but like for the time, I think they worked well. I think it's a decent Weekend Update.
And no celebrity corner. This is just Bill being Bill straight. He's not like Stargazer Bill. So there's no crossover in this one. This is the first time we've really seen that.
That's true.
Well, after Weekend Update, we get the Blues Brothers back. They come on and do Got Everything I Need almost and B-Movie Boxcar Blues.
I feel if you're like us and you like the Blues Brothers, you really like this. And if you don't like the Blues Brothers, you probably didn't. Me, I sang along to every word.
I wanted to say that, one of these songs was from the Downchild Blues Band, which was a white blues band in Canada that was one of the original sort of inspirations for the Blues Brothers.
Almost. That was theirs.
Yeah, and then the other was a song by a white blues artist. I'm not going to remember.
Dilbert McClinton.
Yeah, and I love how in the second song, the brothers hit the deck.
Yeah,
they literally lie down so that the band can kind of do a proper sort of solo. That was kind of cool. Here, I'm going to read you what I wrote in the book. I got everything I need almost. Paid tribute to the Downchild Blues Band, the white Toronto blues outfit whose songs had caught John Belushi's attention the first time he walked into Dan's 505 Club. That was his speakeasy in Toronto. Dan Aykroyd stood a pace or two behind John, at his right, his comfort zone, blowing harmonica fills, joining his partner in a little dance at the musical break. The second number, B-Movie Boxcar Blues, showcased the dueling guitars of Steve Cropper and Matt Guitar Murphy.
So good.
Man, that guy was ripped.
Oh, my God.
He was a strong guy. In a song penned, by Delbert McClinton, the white Texas blues man, the brisk vocals taxed John's limited powers of intonation. But this was a showcase for the band. Yeah. Midway through, the brothers actually lay down on stage to allow a clear view of the musicians, who charged into a double-time boogie workout. Then the brothers rose and jitterbugged in jubilation. The set closed with John locking the cuffs back on Aykroyd's hands as the band played an outro in the anachronistic style of an R&B showcase. That's what I wrote.
Yep.
Yeah. I had forgot that they played them off with I Can't Turn You Loose Again. I forgot that part.
Yeah. They really had their shtick worked out by this time.
Yeah.
And my wife pointed out Aykroyd had the little, what's that called? The little...
like soul patch thing?
Soul patch, yeah. And I was trying to figure out, did he have that or did they like apply it for that scene?
Yeah. He only puts it on for when he's Elwood.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
This was great watching the band. Like
I was
Steve
just going to
and
say the same
Schaefer,
thing.
that was the best part. Watching those guys go at it. It was a great start. Yeah, so
Watching
good.
those three, but also watching Paul Schaefer off to the side, kind of like directing the band. He's playing the keyboard, but he's also, you can see him like getting the attention of the horns and like having them like,
he's
totally directing them.
He's the conductor.
Yeah.
And he took a great solo in one of those songs. I admire him immensely. You know, I interviewed him for this book, and I was talking to him about when. Do you guys remember when Kate Bush was on the show?
She'll come on soon. She hasn't come on yet. She's on in like 3.
Oh, okay.
episodes.
It's in a subsequent episode.
Yep.
That's a great performance. Just her and Paul Schaefer at the keys, and I think he was telling me that he just improvised that. And he's a brilliant man. He's a brilliant musician.
Yeah,
you got to hand it to him.
He really is.
Paul told us a story, Daniel. We talked to him about the first time they were on, where we asked him like how involved he was in picking out the songs for the album, whatever. And he's like, well, not really, but we worked through it. He goes, but at one point, John started hanging out with Dilbert McClinton. And all of a sudden, we're doing B-Movie Boxcar Blues on the album. We're like, okay.
If you have John Belushi's ear, you might as well pitch a song.
Yeah. He also gave a lot of credit to Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn for the music selection.
My sense was that, Cropper told me that he was pushing them toward doing some familiar songs. He wanted to make sure they had at least a couple songs that everybody would recognize because they were doing some obscure stuff. That's always the tension in a band, right?
Yeah. I want to take a minute, Daniel. You mentioned, kind of the backstage vibe and mentality with everybody fatigue. How much animosity is there right now? I think you touch upon this in the book a little bit. You know, Dan and John stealing the show, the Blues Brothers. Weren't people kind of thinking it like, I think you mentioned the joke, like kind of as a joke, like they kind of behind their backs thought it was a joke act them at this point. I just wanted to, like, does that play into anything of the vibe backstage of John and Dan versus the rest of the show at this point?
The signal thing that I remember is that there was this kind of equal status in the contracts of these performers. So like their remuneration was all the same. If they got a bump, they all got the same bump. They were all treated as equals, but it was abundantly clear, certainly by the third or fourth season, that they weren't all equal. You know, I'm going to get the timing wrong, but around this time, Aykroyd, Belushi, Bill Murray, maybe even Lorraine were all involved in film projects. They all had, a bunch of them had stuff going on, and some of them were becoming huge names. Again, if you were around as I was, if even like age 10 at that point, you knew who John Belushi was, you know, and you kind of knew the performers if you watched the show, but you knew who Belushi was independent of Saturday Night Live. And so I think there were rivalries. I think there was some jealousy, understandably, you know. As far as the Blues Brothers, nobody told me when I was researching my book that anybody had anything but fond wishes for the Blues Brothers endeavor. I'm not sure that anybody on the show knew that it was going to become a freaking film. I mean, you know, that had never happened, right? There was no film made out of any SNL bit to that point. So why would anybody think it was going to be anything other than maybe a thing that Lorne would allow on the broadcast a few times, and then it would just run its course. By that time, they had stuff they were redoing, right? So that was sort of common. But only in hindsight would anybody think, wow, this Blues Brothers thing turned into quite the little, I mean, it's hard even to explain, like, to people outside the United States, think the Blues Brothers film was made just out of thin air, that somebody just wrote a story about these two ex-cons or whatever, reprobate characters, and that the story just came out of the ether, when in fact it was spun off from a Saturday Night Live concept. And on the slenderest of themes, I mean, the story doesn't make any sense. I mean, how is anybody going to come up with a movie about this musical act? I mean, but Aykroyd, that was his genius that he did. I mean, he came up with a very complicated story. He wrote like 6 or 7 hours worth of screenplay. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I think there was a lot of animosity and jealousy. You know, different performers probably envied other performers, their fame and so forth. And then the people who had the big fame, like Belushi, couldn't handle it very well. So they had their own problems.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious. Cool.
Well, after those two great numbers, we get Mr. Bill. He goes fishing.
Yeah.
So Mr. Bill, it's a Mr. Bill. He goes fishing. We see he meets Jacques Sluggo.
I like that. I did like that.
I did like that too.
That was a funny, yeah. That Mr. Bill was hugely popular among 11-year-old boys in 1978, 79. Yeah.
We just
oh no, Mr. Bill. And then you'd punch somebody, basically.
It was funny.
You'd
We
clock
just
somebody after saying, oh no,
Are you
Mr. Bill. And then people cream someone.
we just talked to Walter Williams because I was curious this season, Mr. Bill, this is when he starts showing up more prevalent. He's on like 9-10 times this season. I was asking him like, when did you realize, like, when did Mr. Bill become a thing? Like, you knew it was a huge thing because it gets huge reactions. Like when it comes on, it gets a huge reaction from the crowd.
From all the stoners in the audience.
That's so funny though, that
Championed
10-year-olds
by,
are punching each other saying, oh no, at this time. That's awesome.
Somewhat hip bullies all over the country embraced Mr. Bill, and they envisioned themselves as Sluggo.
Oh, that's great.
No, I remember people saying that and clocking me.
Oh my God.
I assume that the other cool kids were doing their Tom Snyder impressions on the playground because they've seen the Tomorrow Show. And
man, that is one. I wonder if anybody under the age 30 has any idea who Tom Snyder is. You had to be an insomniac, even at the time, to watch his show. It was on pretty late, as I recall, but he was a pretty erudite host. I think he's been somewhat forgotten, along with like Phil Donahue, Dick Cavett, great hosts of that era. Dinah Shore, nobody talks about them anymore. But Aykroyd did a fine Tom Snyder. It was a good enough impression that it made me remember Tom Snyder, the real Tom Snyder.
Yeah. I love his Tom Snyder impression. I always do. This time he interviews Carrie as Linda Blair, which honestly caught me off guard. I was like, wait, why is she Linda Blair? I wasn't really sure.
Yeah. But I like that she did that.
Yeah,
she looks just like Linda Blair. She had the hair like dead ringer for an older Linda Blair.
Yeah, well, I think that's what threw me off was I was thinking Linda Blair was still like 13, but I guess at this time Linda Blair's like 19.
Oh, she'd been in some trashy movies, and yeah. She's got the character had the Carrie's in the Canadian tuxedo.
Now, Linda, you're a gal who hasn't exactly had typical adolescence. At 13, you played the devil where you spewed green vomit wet on the rug. You played a teenage alcoholic, and in the TV movie Born Innocent, you were an inmate in a woman's reform school where you got poked with a broom handle. You've had a spotty education at best. You've been busted for coke all before age 20. My question to you is, what next for Linda Blair?
Well, Tom, I'm still real young, and I've got lots to look forward to, unhappy marriages, household accidents, and maybe even a nervous breakdown. I'm really entitled to one.
Well, thank you, Linda. We've been talking with actress Linda Blair. I want you to join us next time on Tomorrow when we'll be speaking with a group of witches from Steeltown. That's right, white witches from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They're Steelers fans, members of the Molders and Ironworkers Union, and white witches.
Hey, Tom, you want some blow?
Good night, everybody.
I thought this was a fun Tomorrow Show. I thought Carrie Fisher was good. Like, I thought she was good as Linda. Again, I don't have much reference to Linda Blair, but I thought it was fun that she played someone else.
Here's a question for you guys. Would SNL have made such blatant sort of cavalier drug references in like season 1 as they did in season 4? Because there's a bunch of really funny but really pretty blunt drug talk in this episode.
No, they did. This is definitely a season 4 thing. You definitely see. You saw a little bit in season 3,
Very
right, Gary?
druggy.
But season 4,
progression,
you've definitely seen season 4. Like even the scene or even the sketch we saw, the Loud family, with them just sitting there smoking pot in the living room. Even something like that would have been more.
You think that was a real joint?
I was going to say yes.
Oh, were you?
I bet it was.
It could have been. Actually, yeah, season 4, yeah.
I bet it was.
But I think like in season 1, I think the most they did, Gary, maybe was like there was a sketch of like the Gerald. It wasn't Gerald Ford, like the rolling of the joint sketch where all you saw was hands rolling. Right, that was kind of thing. That was kind of the most thing.
Yeah.
There's the the acid
More veiled
call,
references, right?
The Jerry,
The Jimmy Carter thing,
acid
yeah.
phone call. There's that, but no. And this is week in and week out. Week in and week out, you're getting just blatant drug
lot
joke,
of
drug
drugs.
humor. It's really out there this season. Yeah.
And it's not like there's anything in that that's violative of any particular decency law or anything, but it's just interesting how pervasive Coke was in our culture, that because I guess you just wouldn't have talk like that on a late night show now, because people wouldn't get it. I mean, it was really funny. There were so many people using it at that point.
Yeah. I feel like now you get like a passing mention, maybe like a one-line joke, but you wouldn't get a Tom Snyder going
whole
off for
thing's
2
about
minutes
cocaine.
about, well, if I got that, I'd go back to the dealer or the pusher or who, whatever, and get your money back. Like, you would not have such a long back and forth.
Yeah.
Nor would you have, probably my favorite line of this was at the very end when Carrie Fisher goes into the exorcist voice. She's
Exorcist
like,
mode.
"Hey, Tom, you want some blow?" But I like this one, Gary, too, really, and you'll laugh at me at this, because it has been a night of big sketches, big cast sketches. I liked seeing two people on a couch. I like seeing two people run a scene together. It was a nice change of pace, and they were very good at it.
A little
And
more
so it was a nice way of like keeping things fresh this evening.
I agree. It was a nice change of pace. But then we go right back to everybody's in the next sketch.
Ooh, yeah, we do.
We go to, there's a chyron that comes on that says Marseille 1978, which I wasn't sure why they needed to tell me that it was the same year that the show aired, but that's fine. And we go to a bar in Marseille where the bar is just full of prostitutes.
Oh, I thought you were going to say cast members.
Well, cast members, some of whom are playing prostitutes. How's that? So,
It's another full cast sketch.
yeah. So John is spouting a story and just buying drinks for Jane and Gilda. And then Bill comes in and won't buy a drink for Lorraine. But then Carrie sits down with him and talks to him. And while he won't buy a drink for her, she starts selling him mutual funds.
Which were probably a relatively new concept in 1978 or 9.
Yes, they were.
The mutual fund.
Yeah.
It's so she's not turning tricks, but either getting people to buy drinks for her or mutual funds. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And she was the big seller of the night then, because she sold, I forget how many glasses of champagne and then like 3 mutual funds or something.
Yeah.
The strange sketch.
Yeah, this was the clunker of the night for me. I was, and I had a feeling, Gary, I feel like we've seen enough of these sketches where like they're big and in a bar and you see a lot of people, and I don't even think we get to John at the bar yet. And I'm just like, I had a worry. I was like, I feel this sketch is going to go nowhere.
It's
And I
tank. Huh?
yeah, I just had that from the get go. It's like, this is one where there's going to be a lot of energy put into it and a lot of people talking, and there's not a lot coming out of it.
No.
It didn't feel like there was a lot of contagious laughter when we get to the mutual fund joke. It's like, what?
I felt like people were tired.
funds?
Like John's story about the boat just went on and went nowhere.
What was the point? Like, you didn't need any of that John talking to Gilda
None.
and Jane, and then you never see Gilda and Jane again, really. So it's like, why are they there? That whole part was, I mean, it's all about Bill coming in, and
Right.
I did like when he walks in with, it's Lorraine, right? He walks in with Lorraine, and
He walks in and Lorraine meets him. Yeah.
she meets him, and she talks how she's thirsty and she needs a drink, and he goes to the bar and he goes, "Give me a beer. Give this thirsty person a glass of water."
That was good.
That was my one laugh of the sketch.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the end, the mutual fund thing came in and just like, what's happening? What?
Yeah.
And she had been selling to Garrett in the
Yeah.
corner, and Garrett came over to like call to the fine print. At the end I wrote, I was like, I was right. It went nowhere. Damn it.
Yeah. A
Congratulations.
meandering late show sketch.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, we have one
Final
more. We have one
reel.
more live piece, no? Right.
We have one more live piece,
one more.
and it's a bad sketch. So we get Bad Red Chinese Ballet.
Bad meaning good?
That's a Leonard Pinth Garnell sketch. So it's bad. And it's exactly what I just said it is. It's a bad red Chinese ballet that comes on and happens. And Garrett slides into the scene
as Mickey Rivers from the Yankees,
Rivers.
which is a name a lot of younger people won't know.
Or in the context of the ballet, Yankee imperialism.
Right.
It's another strange sketch.
You're still not, Gary's still like, no, I don't.
No, yeah, it's sure fine. If that's what you're telling me, that's fine. Yeah,
I mean, he introduced it that way in the intro, and in his very wordy Dan Aykroyd intro, he was like, "Keep note or look out for this."
Oh, I liked his character doing the introduction. That was the part of the sketch I enjoyed.
Oh, it's so good.
I liked made me think of Alistair Cook.
Yeah.
And it made me think, you know what? This is not the Tonight Show, because it was just such a strange sketch, and Carson would never have aired something like that.
No.
Yeah, it's a strange one, and it's a strange one even for the bad series.
Oh, you weren't a big fan?
No, I wasn't.
Oh. I thought it was quick enough. It was very quick. I thought it was just quick enough where it didn't get too fat that you could enjoy it. And we hadn't seen one in a while. This is the first bad sketch of the season, so I think it's a little. It was fun to see Leonard Pimp back again, and I do think the fact that they kept it short helped, because it's not great, but it's short enough that it works and it gets out of the way.
And yeah,
it certainly kept my attention.
Huh. It did not keep my attention. I don't know why.
It's
but
like
even
a minute and a half long.
Just for sheer strangeness, right?
I know.
Sheer strangeness.
Well, the last piece of the night did keep my attention, actually. It's a Schiller's Reel.
Really? Because this is the one that I kind of started zoning out on.
Oh, where the husband dies.
Yeah, and this is another one that's only 2 minutes, but for some reason I started
this is also short.
Yeah, it's short, but
I like Schiller's work.
Yeah, I agree. This one is called Roman Holiday, and it's basically a travel film of a couple who go to Rome and they go to the Colosseum and they do all of these things. And the husband's name happens to be Roman, and it's all narrated by the wife. And then Roman has a heart attack after the wife has been, flirting with these Italian guys. So these Italian guys are flirting with the wife more and more. And then Roman has
he collapses into his pasta.
Yes. And he dies. And she remarries one of these Italian guys really quick. I don't know. I thought she was good. The whole thing was odd, but I thought this woman was very good. And just the whole play of, these young Italian guys hitting on this older American woman and kind of fawning over her. And I liked it. I enjoyed it.
It was a fun send up of kind of middle class Americana,
Yeah.
The American tourist, the ugly American, perhaps.
No, exactly. They do a great job of making fun of American tourists. I had to go back and watch it. I don't think this was a good way to end the night, because, as you mentioned in the last sketch, Gary, I zoned out, and it is a short sketch or a short piece, but I zoned out. So on my first watching, I didn't like it. And I was like, I feel like I missed something. I actually went back and I actually watched it a second time, and yeah, it is funny. It's very good. There's a lot of subtle things. It's a classic Schiller where it's a very slow build up and you have to wait until the very end to get your joke when the guy dies, and then she takes his insurance money to get remarried. But there are a lot of subtle things if you're watching it where she mentions in her narration about how he had just come off a coronary bypass.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a shot with them at the fountain, and he's patting himself down because sweating, and he's lugging all the bags up the stairs. And all this leads to that scene at the Italian dinner where which I missed the first time I saw it. I missed all of that because I'm just like, what's going on? And why are we watching this crappy home movie? And I wasn't giving it the attention it needed. And so then I went back and watched it, and I was like, okay, it makes a lot more sense. And it's
right.
It's Schiller being Schiller. He does this really well where he takes some type of filmmaking construct, with La Dolce Gilda, it was a Fellini movie, and he did his take on a Fellini movie. And this is his take on family home movies.
Right.
And it's just, I had to watch it a second time to appreciate it. And I think you're right. It's better than I originally gave it thought for.
Yeah. I did think the placement as the last thing of the night it did the film disservice putting it so late, but I did enjoy it for what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. That's our show. We go to good nights. John and Dan are back as Jake and Elwood to say goodnight. They're in
the whole band
costume.
is there. The band takes over the stage. You can't see the cast.
No.
which kind of like was real life, right? In real life, the Blues Brothers endeavor was going to eclipse the show.
That's kind of one
to
of like
some
the
extent.
animosity thing I asked. I was like, okay, like
Yeah.
this is the SNL show, but it's this. It's the Blues Brothers that you see in the Good Nights.
So I think you guys both enjoyed the show more than I did. What were some of the things that you liked about it, Daniel?
Well, I don't watch a lot of classic SNL episodes these days, so probably Brad's and your reactions are more valid than mine.
I don't know about that,
valid than any
actually.
other.
No.
It was. I laughed throughout. There weren't many all-time classic sketches in this episode, but most of them were pretty good. And Carrie Fisher really gave it her all, and wasn't spooked or overwhelmed as the host. Like I think she did a good job. As you were pointing out, Steve Martin and Buck Henry are what they are, but she did a pretty credible job as an actor coming on, and basically a straight actor coming on, and there's a lot of great stuff. So I enjoyed it. I would say out of the several dozen, I haven't seen every episode, but the ones I've seen from the first 4 seasons, I'd say this is solidly in the upper half, not top 5 or 10, but it's one of the better ones, I would say, overall, to me anyway.
And Brad, you really liked this.
It's interesting. At first viewing, I didn't really like it that much. And then I went back and I sat there and I thought about it for a while. And this is the first instance I questioned, to Daniel's point, where he's like, oh, you guys are in a better state of commenting. Are we? Because is it a disservice watching so many episodes so close to each other? Because you're unfairly comparing it to other things. So I thought this, in the grand scheme of things, was a very middle of the road episode. But looking at it in season 4, I think it's an above average episode. I think there's a lot of good things here. If we hadn't just seen season 3 like mere months ago, if we had a summer off in between watching episodes, right, I think our take would be different. I think we bring a lot. This is the first episode I kind of felt that, because there's not much here, but there's a couple bright spots. And then I realized there's 2 iconic moments. That Blues Brothers, Soul Man, and Rosanna are 2 of the most iconic moments you're going to see of the 5 years. There's nothing horrible. The World's Bar sketch almost got there, but that's easily the worst thing. And it's not like worst thing we've ever seen. There's just nothing really, really super high. I thought it was interesting. I liked that there were so many big sketches, that you saw the cast so much. I think Garrett was in everything except for the Today Show. Jane's in tons of sketches. So I think for season 4, this is an above average sketch for this season. And I did I really liked it.
I agree with you about this season. The caveat is that, there have been some really weak shows this season, but coming into this stretch, we talked about kind of righting the ship, right? And you go from Steve Martin to Buck Henry to Carrie Fisher, and those 3 episodes, and I think this holds true, is those 3 episodes kind of bring up season 4 compared to the first 3 episodes.
They are. I agree.
And so it's definitely, it's definitely one of the better episodes of this season.
But this was the first episode, Gary, where I did wonder if it was a disservice of cramming so much in so much, because you're like, oh, we're like not overwhelmed, but you're just comparing to so many things, and you don't have a 4-month break.
Right.
And it's like, here's new Saturday Night Live. It's like, we just watched Steve Martin. How many months? The Steve Martin Blues Brothers episode,
right? Like
how many months ago? And like, that's fresh in your mind, and Buck Henry's. And so,
way to undercut the entire thesis of this podcast.
Well, someone's got to do this dirty work of watching these. And hey, remember that when it was first on the air, people watched them in pretty rapid succession. I was in a wonderful place to be able to turn on the episode when I hadn't seen a classic SNL in probably a couple of months,
right,
and watch it and like, wow, it holds up pretty damn well.
Yeah.
and it's not one of the great SNL episodes, but people kind of know that if you're watching an SNL episode with Belushi, Aykroyd, Gilda, Jane Curtin, Bill Murray in it, it's probably going to be pretty good. Not every one, but
Yeah.
most.
I think this is going to find our way into our top 5, if not top third by the end of the season. It's going to stay. It's going to stay up high. Of season 4, it's going to be a high episode on season 4.
Probably.
Definitely. Yeah.
That sounds right.
Well, Daniel, what were your best bits?
Oh, you mean of this show?
Yep.
Watching it again, of course the Blues Brothers stuff is great. I loved the beach blanket bingo sketch, and I think Update was really fun. Yeah. I hadn't seen that whole package, that iteration of Update with those two hosts, and so that was really fun. But to your guys' point, I would say most of the sketches in this show were good, not great, solid, not super memorable. There was only, as Brad said, maybe 1 or 2 stinkers. But yeah, that's what I think.
All right. Brad, how about you? What were your best bits?
Soul Man, Rosanna Dana, the 2 iconic bits we all know.
Uh-huh.
And I threw the Loud family in there. I think it's worth going back and watching. I watch it a second time and see if you appreciate it a bit more.
I'll turn the volume up.
That's interesting. I had Soul Man and Rosanna Dana were the 2 that I had. I really love this Rosanna Dana. So that's up there for me always.
Yeah. Out of that Update, that was the best part of it. Definitely.
It was a great end to the Update too. It kind of wrapped it up nicely.
But Beach Blanket Bingos is a good call. I mean, there's so much going on to pull that sketch off, and there's so much happening that that's another one everybody knows too. I feel like if you ever mention Carrie Fisher episode to people, they think of that sketch. I feel like
that's the first. Yeah.
Well, it takes up a third of the show, so yes,
it's a long sketch, but it didn't wear out its welcome for me.
No.
Because Zweibel kept it fresh. Every 5 minutes,
right.
Zweibel would run through and keep it fresh for you.
He had a pretty good bod.
Surf's up.
Zweibel did.
He did, actually.
He was ripped, right?
He was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for doing this with us. This was a lot of fun. It was great to talk to you again.
Back.
Likewise. Glad I could help a little bit, and really grateful for the support you've given to my book. And this is a super fun podcast. If you ever want me back, let me know. I don't know what more I could add, but it's fun talking to you guys.
We will. Thank you.
And if anybody's sitting around with Barnes & Noble's gift cards from the holidays you haven't used yet and you're wondering what to do, again, we can't say it enough. If you haven't gotten it, The Blues Brothers, An Epic Friendship, The Rise of Improv, and the Making of an American Film Classic. This book is fantastic. Please check it out.
Excellent book.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's an Amazon Book of the Year, so that has gotten me a little bit of traffic. And everybody who's written back to me said they liked it. Of course, the people who don't like it probably aren't going to write to me.
Hey, we've told you how much we love this book. We did do an episode with Daniel a few weeks ago. If you haven't listened to that, we dive into the book a lot more than we did tonight.
It was good. Yeah, guys were great. That was really interesting stuff.
So listen to that pod. This was great. This was so much fun to watch this and talk about this episode with you. So thank you so much. Everyone go out and buy the book because it's amazing. Anything else you want to tell everyone about, Daniel?
Well, just that if you buy the paperback of this book, which comes out in March, you guys are in it because I mentioned you in the footnotes because you gave me information I didn't have. And so any fan of this podcast, you could, if you wanted to, wait and buy the paperback because then this podcast is mentioned in it.
Yeah, that was Brad's hard detective work that he was doing. His intense journalism.
Kudos, props,
Good job,
man.
Brad. Yeah.
Yeah. My hat's off to you.
Oh, thank you.
Next week, we're going to take a break from the early years, Brad.
A little something special.
Yes. As a lead up to the SNL 50th anniversary, we've got deep thoughts,
Yes, we do.
some tournament talks, and some My SNL stories with some very influential folks who started the show.
Yeah, so we're gonna take a little break from the early years, from diving into season 4, and try to join the SNL 50 celebration with everybody with some special episodes.
And to kick off our celebration, we have some deep thoughts on the 15th anniversary show.
Nice.
It's going to be fun.
Mhm.
We're going to be joined by Bill Kenny from the
Ooh.
SNL Hall of Fame. Until then, good night and have
Good
a
night,
pleasant tomorrow.
And have a pleasant tomorrow.
There's some.